All right. Well, I have got three after, so we will get started for today. Thank you, everyone, for hopping on with us for our April student series. We are so happy you have chosen to be with us tonight or this afternoon, wherever you are across the U.S. We know for many of you, it is the end of the semester, and probably for some of you, a couple of weeks close to graduation. So for our soon-to-be new social workers, welcome. We are so excited you have chosen social work. Tonight's student series events is hopefully a topic that is going to be directly helpful and relevant as you enter our profession. We have a really amazing panel who is going to talk to you about some really important resources that you may use as you continue on in your social work journey. You're going to hear from some social workers and some social work adjacent supportive folks, librarians, about how to apply the research skills that you've used throughout your BSW and MSW programs out in the real world. We were talking a little bit before the session started today. And sorry if I didn't introduce myself. My name is Dwayne Brejak. I'm the executive director for the Michigan chapter, and I've been helping moderate these sessions for a couple of years now. But I've been with out in the field for about 12 years now. And one of the things I constantly hear from social workers who reach out at NASW are, how can I find access to X set of information? You know, I'm looking for the most up-to-date research, best practices, how to actually get published. You know, it kind of runs the whole gamut of getting information to clients, to our communities, to our legislators. And our panel today is going to hopefully equip you all with some tools to continue on in your lifelong social work journey. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panel. Stephen Maher from New York University, a librarian for the New York University, is going to get us kicked off and introduce you to the rest of our group today. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks, Dwayne. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen Maher. I am the librarian for social work and psychology at New York University. And this is what to know before you go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laurel Scheinfeld. I'm a liaison to the School of Social Welfare at Stony Brook University on Long Island in New York, and also a liaison to a few other areas in the health sciences as well. Glad to be here, and congratulations to all of you who are graduating.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carin Graves. I'm a librarian for the School of Social Work at Michigan State University.
And so what we're going to do, we'd like to get to know all of you, and I know everyone's just kind of getting settled in and things like that. So if you would be so kind, you can see we have a little poll everywhere question for you to let us know where you think you'll be practicing social work. Maybe somewhere in Antarctica or somewhere in the US. But if you go to the link on the screen, that QR code, you'll be able to engage with the question. I'm going to drop it in the chat as well. So it's going to be pollev.com/NYUBOBCAT, and then it should take you to that page there. It does look like the link is a little weird. Let's see, I'm not sure why. You may have to copy it and drop it into your own URL, into your own browser to get it going. For some reason, it looks like it's just there's like one part of the browser showing right there. But otherwise, you could also grab your mobile device and take a snapshot of that QR code that you can see on the screen right now. Perfect. Great. Thank you. As folks are joining us, as they look at this lovely globe kind of picture of a world map, wondering what have they landed themselves into. Welcome to What to Know Before You Go, Social Work Scholarship after graduation. You are joined by a whole bunch of social work librarians here to celebrate you as you can get on to graduation, but also if you're not getting there yet, eventually you'll get there. And we'll be talking about social work resources for your practice once you're out there in the real world doing social work, and how to connect and engage with research after graduation. So what we're doing right now is just a little bit of an activity to see where everyone's at. We'll give it another minute or so as people get into the poll everywhere URL, and just kind of drop in the pin where you think you'll be practicing social work. I'm just going to drop that link in the chat one more time for folks who just are joining us. Or you can also take a snapshot of the QR code that's on the screen as well. Right. Let's take a peek and see where. All right. Yep. Not surprising. I had a feeling with the NASW that we would be the N for national would suggest that we would be somewhere in the continental US. So lots of pin marks around there. It's great to see. With that in mind too, we are a bunch of social work librarians within a lot of different programs where folks like yourselves are getting your social work degrees. Just to say that we are just one of many social work librarians that are out there within various social work schools and the various universities and programs. So one takeaway from this talk is feel free to reach out to your library after this session, or in the coming weeks, to see what resources are available to you after you graduate. Something to keep in mind as we kind of get started here. And feel free to come back to this and put on some more marks as we go. But it looks like it's a wonderful collection. We've got the map of the U.S. pretty much covered there, at least the continental U.S. On. So what are we going to do today? So we're going to do basically two things. First and foremost, we're just going to reinforce the research skills you have already learned or are in the process of learning in your social work program. There's no quiz, so if some of the things that we covered today are completely new to you, okay, you've picked up something new, which is great. And one other thing we'll also do is introduce you to some of the resources, tools, and spaces that will support your practice as a lifelong learner and social worker out in the real world. So a lot of the things that we're going to show you are things that you can take with you and kind of incorporate into your day-to-day life as a social worker out in the world, thinking about both the resources that can be freely available, both like where you're currently at, but also as you travel to other places, if you find yourself practicing social work, in a different state in the future, things along those lines. So these are skills that you can take with you in a lot of different capacities. And these are also, thinking about the resources and tools. These are resources and tools that aren't just limited to social workers. A lot of the tools that we're going to show you are things that the clients and communities that you'll be working with can also can utilize as well. So these are things that you can also kind of think about, not only for yourself as a social worker, but also for your clients and for the communities that you work with. I'm going to pass it on to Laurel for the next step.
Thanks, Stephen. So part of the code of ethics in social work is to base your practice on recognized knowledge, and evidence-based practice is how you do that. The term evidence-based practice was used initially in relation to medicine, but it's since been adopted by many fields, including social work. And it's a three-pronged approach, taking into consideration the practitioner's individual expertise, the client's values and expectations, and the best research evidence. So the challenge is, how do you obtain the best research evidence when you're no longer a student at a university that provides access to expensive databases? So we're going to share with you some resources that you can utilize to search for evidence. But first, we want to review how to prepare to conduct a search. Next slide. Thanks. So to gather the best research evidence, we recommend you use the 5 A's. So you start by asking a question that you need an answer to. Then you acquire the evidence, appraise the evidence, apply that evidence to the situation and assess how it went. And that usually leads to asking more questions. And so the process is continuous. Next slide. So when you're asking the question, it'll usually start with an issue or a problem or a question that you've are facing in your practice. You'll want to refine that question into a searchable question. And to do this, we recommend that you use a framework. And a framework helps you get very clear about your question. And that's really important for choosing the concepts and the terms that you're going to search for the information with. Next slide. So there are a lot of different frameworks out there. And the most common one in medicine that you may have heard of is PICO. But for social work questions, I find this one often works well. And the acronym is PO, where the P stands for patient or population or problem. The E stands for exposure. And the O stands for outcome. So let me give you an example of a scenario and then create a question using the PO framework. So let's say you're working with a family, perhaps a parent and their teenage child, and the child's having difficulty communicating with their parent effectively. You also know that the student is on the autism spectrum. And during your meetings with the family, you've noted that the child talks excitedly about the musical artists they follow and the songs they like. So you start to wonder if perhaps music therapy might be useful in this case. So using the PO framework for this example, the P might be a teenager with autism. The E could be music therapy. And the O would be improved communication skills. And so based on that, this could be my refined question. In teens with autism spectrum disorder, does music therapy improve communication skills? Now I'll pass it on to Stephen.
Thanks, Laurel. So now that we have that question, we can start using things like Boolean logic, if you've maybe heard of that before, kind of library speak for ands, ors, or not, but also search syntax. That'll also be useful in our work. So when we think about the ands and the ors and the nots, the ors are going to broaden our search. So if we look at the fields, the very top row there, where we see teen or teenager or adolescent, if we just did a search on that all by itself, we're going to get tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of research, right? Because it's studies on teens, teenagers, or adolescents, and that can be in any number of disciplines, not only social work, but psychology, but pediatrics, and it can run any number of different areas of research. The and, however, is going to help us kind of narrow things down, because if we add an and, we're also going to see not only like what is out there in terms of research on teenagers and adolescents, but we want to see the relationship between that population and research on autism spectrum disorder or ASD. So if the and is going to give us that intersection between the two, we can add another and for music therapy, and that number is going to get even smaller. So the ands and the ors help kind of broaden or narrow our search depending on the terms that we're using as we develop our search strategy. The wildcards are a little bit different, and so are the truncations. And the reason why we use those is to kind of add a little sophistication, a little finesse as we do our searching. So we remember previously in the previous image, we saw a teenager, but when we put the pound sign for AGER, what we get then is variations on teenager. We can get teenage, teenager, teenagers, just with those pound symbols. And that's what we call a wild card. So we can find variations of that word of teenager by putting those pound symbols after the word, after teen. The asterisk is what we call a truncation. And the reason why we call it a truncation, you haven't guessed, we're putting it in the middle of the word, right? So it's actually not, we took out the T in adolescence, and now have an incomplete word. But with that asterisk at the end, what we're now telling the database to do is not only look for the word adolescent with the T, but we can also get the developmental stage of adolescence with a CE. Also, the plural of adolescents with a T and S. So the truncation, that asterisk symbol, can give you a lot of variation for finding different types of words. Another good example of this could be if we think of like woman or women. If you put a pound sign replacing the in between the M and the N in woman or women, we'll get both. We'll get variations of woman and woman or woman. So that's how that would work. And now we have going to start to kind of put this all into practice, talking about some of the resources that we can start to utilize for applying those search strategies into practice. And the first one is available to you through your membership with NASW, and that's the NASW Research Library. We'll get into it in a lot more detail in a few more minutes, but just to call your attention to a few things here. We'll probably spend most of our time in the EBSCO Discovery Service, but there are, as you can see on the screen here, a lot of different tools that are available to you that can be really useful as part of your kind of professional life and research using the NASW Research Library. And a lot of the user interface that you've already grown accustomed to at your respective libraries will feel very familiar using a number of the databases that are available here. Because as you can see on the list here, there's quite a few databases that we could potentially explore. I'm going to spend most of our time in a few minutes in the EBSCO Discovery Service, but just to call your attention to another one of these, which is the Social Work Reference Center. If we just go to the screen here, I'll quickly log into it so you can kind of get a preview of what to expect. When we get to the database, I'll click on the research library, and now we get the full list of all the different resources that are available through the research library. The Social Work Reference Center kind of gives you like tip sheets on different ways of treating particular predicaments or circumstances that you may come familiar with in your work as a professional social worker. So for instance, if looking at caregiving, we click on this, kind of gives us a quick kind of care sheet. And we have a breakdown on like facts and figures, risk factors, how to do assessments, do a treatment summary, all of those sorts of like kind of broad overviews on a given topic that can be really useful as you're just getting familiar with a new circumstance, a new diagnosis, a new kind of situation that you may find yourself in as a practicing social worker. We'll get into all that in a little while. Carin?
Okay, so
Oh, sorry, Laurel.
oh, that's okay. Another useful tool is Google Scholar. It's a free web search engine that specifically searches scholarly literature and academic sources. It's different from a database like the ones that Stephen was just showing you, in that we can never really know exactly what's included in there. In a database, we can get a list of exactly the publications that are indexed and the dates of coverage. We don't have that in Google Scholar. Also, it's not specific to social work like the other databases, like Social Work Reference Center would be. So it contains all disciplines of scholarly literature, and that can sometimes get a little bit overwhelming. But in the case of social work, since it's a field that's naturally interdisciplinary, it can be helpful sometimes. So, but it's important to keep those things in mind. Search engines like Google Scholar don't always work so well with the Boolean operators and the search syntax that Stephen was going over earlier. So we usually recommend just enter your key terms into the box by themselves. On this slide here, I've highlighted a few elements of Google Scholar that might be useful to you. So rather than using the Boolean operator not, which doesn't work very well in a search engine, you can use a minus sign to exclude a term. So if, for example, I'm searching for adolescent autism, music therapy, and I'm getting a lot of results related to group therapy, and that's not what I'm interested in. I could add a minus sign with the word group to exclude those results. The next red arrow that's all the way over to the right is just pointing out where you'll see full text links if a free copy of the full text is available. The next arrow on the left is pointing to that save function. So if you click save, that little star next to it will become a solid blue, and the result will be saved so you can come back to it later. And I'll show you where in a second. The next two arrows pointing up are showing you sources for additional articles that may be relevant to your topic. So if you find one really perfect article, that may be a good place to look for some more. It also shows you how many times the article has been cited by other papers. So that can give you some idea of its impact or importance. And the last arrow on that page is pointing to the search alert function. So if you want Google Scholar to email you as new results are added in the future, and results that would be retrieved by this same search later on, you can set up a search alert to get those emails. Okay, ready for the next slide. So on this slide, that first red arrow on the left is pointing to My Library, which is where your articles are saved when you click on that star below the article's title and description. So you can find My Library in the drop-down menu on the left, top left of Google Scholar, and it opens when you click on those three lines. Also in that drop-down menu is the option to use the advanced search function. So even though Boolean operators and truncation and parentheses might not work well in the main search box, you can still get some of that functionality in the advanced search. So here's where you can search for an exact phrase, you can exclude particular words, or you can search just in the title, or just look for a specific author or journal or date range.
All right, so PubMed Central is another database that's really useful after you graduate. You may be familiar with just PubMed in general. PubMed Central is the full text archive. It's from the National Library of Medicine. So if you want to be able to just do a search and know you'll have the full text for any of the results, it's a great option. It does have just kind of a generic landing page here, but if you click on advanced, and you can go to the next slide. This is what the advanced search builder looks like. So if you're more familiar with a lot of the databases you maybe used in school through your library, it's set up with the same Boolean logic. If you click on the drop down from all fields, you'll have options to search in just the author field or search in title abstract, etc. So this is a really great tool. It does lean a little bit more medical, but it can be great for mental health intervention research and related like allied health articles.
Okay, so now it's time for a little work for all of you to do. So what we have here is a bit of a clinical vignette, you know, kind of something for you to kind of imagine yourself doing in the future. You're a social worker in an integrated health clinic that uses a collaborative care model. You work with this primary care providers and typically see your clients after they've met with them. And one of these clients, Mike, a 32-year-old male with diabetes, he works in an oil change shop, and his hemoglobin A1C level has been 12 to 14% in the past year. His primary care provider keeps adjusting his insulin level, however, has not impacted his A1C levels. But after some time, you know, you've been working with him and you agree to keep your conversation confidential. Mike talks with you about how he is also using heroin daily. but only so that he doesn't get sick. He says that he started using around the age of 15, and that his use of opioids and alcohol has increased in frequency and amount over the past few years. He explained how no one at work knows about his drug use except one other friend who also uses heroin. So kind of keeping that kind of Mike's story in mind, we can want to kind of see what kind of questions we can kind of build out from there. So what we're going to do next is we have a Padlet for you to kind of start to kind of put together your research question or the questions you may want to ask based on Mike's story. Just grab the Padlet link, that in the chat.
Oh, I went ahead and put it in the chat for us.
Oh,
there.
great. Awesome. Thank you.
Beat you to it. And I'll go explain a little bit about how the Padlet works. So when you're looking at the Padlet, you're going to see a couple of columns, and below the columns is a little plus sign. Once you click on that plus sign, you'll have a pop-up, and you can just put in the information there that you want to. For this short exercise, feel free to use what's ever available to you. So either, PubMed Central, the National Association of Social Workers Research Library, the Google Scholar. So just to test out using what we've talked about within one of these databases more hands-on. Well, when we were discussing this, we thought we'd give you about 10 minutes, and then afterwards we will show you how this works in the NASW Research Library.
While you're working, I'm just going to jump back to the vignette so you have that to refer to. But you also have the link in the chat as far as accessing the Padlet. So you can kind of multitask, kind of review the vignette and come back and take a look.
And Stephen, I did want to remind everybody that that research library, those who happen to be members of NASW, student members, will have full access, and otherwise not. And that's because of our partnership with EBSCO. NASW pays for access to that database, and we are legally limited to offering it to members as a closed group. So this is not meant to be a membership pitch, but boy, if you are going to be doing research, that is a bonanza. And Dwayne and I will both always say, if it's useful to you to be a member, join before your grad date and pay student dues for the first year after graduation. So thanks. I'm so glad you're showing it, though. I'm really proud of it. I think it's a great benefit.
And as a past MSW students, yeah, the student rate is a great rate.
I forgot to say we were going to give you 10 minutes for this, and I said that at 30 after. So at 40 after, we will move on. As folks are working through the Padlet, I like to explain kind of the reasoning for some of these, the questions on it. So one of them has you you think after you found an article, what does the article tell you? Searching is such an iterative process that you might not find like the perfect article on your first few tries. So think about what the article's telling you, and then think about what keywords you might use to find maybe a better article or an article that complements the one you've already found. Just to keep in mind that you're probably going to run several searches, and that is definitely built into the process. All right, well, thank you guys for working with us on this Padlet. We wanted to make sure there was a little bit of time for you to get your hands in these databases, but I'll turn it back over to Stephen to show you how it might work in the research library.
Thanks, Carin. And thank you all for, yeah, these are great suggestions, great keywords. We copy a few here. Let's see if we can get into the research line. So from here, if I go to the EBSCO Discovery Service, when I click on that, what that will do is take me to this page here. It's kind of opening landing page. And typically what I often recommend students do is skip the basic search, go straight to the advanced search, because there's a lot more that we can do within the research library, because it gives us a lot more options. Kind of like what we saw earlier with the Boolean logic, with the and in a separate row and that kind of thing. And it looks like, oh no, the block of text is the link to the Padlet. That's fine. I will just kind of toggle between the Padlet to take some of these terms. So we'll take AC1 levels, substance use, diabetes, insulin, middle-aged males. Okay, can take a few of those. So let's start with diabetes. And as you can see here, there's also going to giving us a few options to choose from. So I'm actually just going to scroll down and select diabetes type 2 or diabetes mellitus type 2, and I'm also just going to put it in quotes because that way too we'll get those specific phrases together when we run our search. I'll follow Laurel's example. We'll also talk about our person, so it's an adult male. Substance abuse or substance use or drug abuse or addiction or drug use. So great, it's giving us some really good examples here we can also incorporate into our search as well. Again, putting it in quotes just because we want to get it to be as refined as possible when we run the search. Let's start here and see what we get. So quite a few results, over 4,000, almost 5,000 results here. But before we get into the results themselves, I want to call your attention to some of these filters or these kind of refinements here on the left-hand side. So one thing that we can do right away is limit it to kind of peer-reviewed journals or full text where full text is available. So with a matter of just a couple of clicks, we can identify the articles that are available to us. And we can also identify peer-reviewed journals. If that hasn't been introduced in your classes, peer review is a way of knowing that the research has been vetted by experts before it was published. So if you're thinking about publishing yourself in the future, going to a peer-reviewed journal, part of the process is before your manuscript is accepted, your paper is accepted for publication, it would be read and assessed by other experts in the social work or research field. And the value of that, both as researchers and practitioners, as well as writers, is to make sure that the research methodology, how you conducted your research was well done, that it was done correctly, that the research that you're doing is unique and kind of carries the scholarly conversation or innovation in the area forward. So just a couple of ways of knowing that, when you're selecting an article, for updating how you may practice, or just kind of communicating with other colleagues, in your social work practice or in the clinic that you're working in, that you're choosing research that has been read and vetted by other experts. So with those 2 clicks, we've narrowed it down a little bit, actually quite a bit, from over almost 5,000 results to over 1,400 results. We can also limit it by time. So perhaps we're not interested in the 20th century. Maybe we want to focus on the 21st century. So we'll say from 2001 to 2024, for instance. And then what we may also do is focus on subject. So if I open that up, what it's going to show me is, we kind of open this up here. Not sure what's happening. Or why it's not. Maybe what I can do, I'm going to remove the full text peer review for a moment and see if that makes a difference. Let me check our subject. That's strange.
I have
For
heard
some
that
reason-
EBSCO is undergoing some platform updates in the coming months,
really?
so it could be causing minor glitches. So
okay.
keep that in mind too, folks, if you're using an EBSCO database. Sometimes I like to say EBSCO works in mysterious ways.
Thanks, Carin. I didn't want to say that because I don't know what their timeline is, Stephen, but they are upgrading and have promised a smoother navigation. That may be what's happening right now. I don't know, but yeah,
Oh, that
Carin,
might be the
likely.
case. Yeah.
Sorry. Unfortunate
Sorry.
timing.
I fixed it. When in doubt, refresh. They're able to. So if we go to the subject, as you saw, we got a kind of a quick list of some of the common subjects among those results. Here's something that we can do, just kind of scanning through them to see if there are any specific terms that we didn't use in our initial search, but we may want to incorporate into our search later on. So far, nothing that really stands out necessarily, but I mean, we know that Mike's male presenting, so we can kind of select that as an example. Substance abuse, we have that as an option too, so we can narrow it down that way as well. Middle age, I know that was one of the options as well that we identified. Maybe that's enough for now, and we can update it using the subjects to kind of refine the search results even further. And now we went from over 4,000, almost 5,000 results to now 56 results. So we got to a smaller pool of results that we can start to kind of go through. At a glance, it's kind of like looking through some of the titles. Nothing here just kind of like immediately stands out, but that also speaks to Carin's point about that kind of iterative searching that we may find ourselves doing. And interesting, like here's an example where a person is using a fruit smoothie, but also it has this like dealing with psychological distress among substance use disorders, receiving opioid agonist therapy. So really interesting kind of ideas around how these two terms are kind of related to each other. Now, if we were to say select one of these results, just taking the first one from the list, you'll notice that in some of the results, they have a full text or PDF available right away. In some cases, PubMed Central is where we might be able to get access to the full text of the article. That was one of the other databases that we mentioned earlier. If we click on the titles of these records, it's not going to take us directly to the results. As you can see here on the left-hand side, again, the links to get to the full text are here. But this is also where we're going to see how the article is described, including having the abstract describing what the article is about, but then also looking at the subjects here could also be interesting. Because now we see substance abuses here, but also opioid abuse. Perhaps if I wanted to click on that alone and see how many articles in this database hit on that subject of opioid abuse, you can say, okay, there's over 75, almost over 74,000 results here. If I wanted to say search within those results for diabetes, I can see what the relationship is between the two. And to do that, what I may find myself doing actually, let's go to the search history. And here I see my 74,000 results where the subject is opioid abuse. And I can scroll down to my original search that got us 48, almost 48,000 results. Check that box. Check the top box for opioid abuse. Search with and we'll see what the intersection is between those two searches. And actually, the number of results is 2. Let's just see what those are. First one we've seen before, and the second one we've also seen before, the fruit smoothies. So this is an example of what you can do within the NASW research library in terms of like crafting searches, using the refined results here on the left to kind of like explore what subjects are being used to kind of identify similar terms, things like that, as well as using the search history to kind of take a look at all the different searching that we've done in just a few minutes and be able to start kind of like building them together, kind of combining them with and to kind of see what the intersection is between the results. It's worth noting too, within these searches, there's a drop-down menu where we can search within specific fields. So here we have the title and the abstract. So we can also search within those specific those specific sections in the record in this database. That may also help kind of refine and narrow the results a bit further as well. So with that in mind, if we did a search say for diabetes, let's say we're looking for that in the title. Say we're looking for opioid. They were looking for that maybe in the abstract. So now we've got it down to over 400 results. And if I click view results, we'll be able to see what those are. Number 9, or number 9 and 10 could also be interesting, kind of seeing what's here. And if we click on the title, we're able to see the record, see how it's described, read the abstract to see whether or not it's relevant to our question, and kind of build and go from there. I'm just going to jump back. Then our hands-on exercise. And maybe before we move into the next steps about other tools, we'll see if anyone had any questions about the search so far.
So feel free to drop questions into the chat, or if you want to use the raise your hand feature, if you've got something directly. I did have one in the chat that you answered, so I just want to say it out loud. And going back to searching, the question was, does it matter how many pound symbols we use? And I've seen a couple of different answers depending on the type of search you might be doing. And Stephen, you had mentioned, yes, it's preferred to have multiple symbols to retrieve variations. And then I had also seen that depending on, like, if you're using PubMed, the or and the and need to be capitalized. So it really does kind of vary somewhat database by database what their search may require, it sounds like.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of the hands-on part of the work. As you get into these different databases, you start to see some of the nuance between them. And that's part of the reason why we also wanted to kind of point to these different examples of like PubMed Central and the NASW Research Library and Google Scholar, is that they have these sort of features that are similar to one another, but they don't look a little bit different. I think one of the kind of useful kind of metaphors that tends to be helpful is kind of thinking about like a dashboard of a car. We kind of expect to know where the odometer might be or how much gas is left in the tank if it's a gas consuming car. But the radio might not be exactly in the same spot as it is in every single car, or maybe some part of the dash is digital, or maybe it has a more analog sort of interface, but you'll still know how fast you're going once you're in the car and you're driving. But it's just a matter of kind of getting familiar with, oh, it's in a different spot than it is in the last car that I drove, or something along those lines. And so that's kind of similar to what we experience with these databases. A lot of the features are there, but they may just be in different spaces. So as you start to kind of get familiar with them and start kind of testing with them, keep in mind, like what Dwayne said about the all caps for the ors and the ands may work, better in one database and may not work at all in another. So kind of hold that in mind as you're doing your searching, that these things, are kind of finicky in that way, but kind of like what we saw with the filters not working, refreshing the screen, being able to troubleshoot on the go. It's another skill to get kind of comfortable with as you search, post MSW and SW program.
Thanks for that. Another question that kind of has come through is for folks who may be doing more macro or policy-based research, maybe effectiveness of a piece of legislation. Are these sites good for that research as well, or are there other databases you would recommend?
So it's going to depend. In fact, let's just kind of do a quick dive out back into the NASW Research Library for that. So if we did a search, say so I'm just going to kind of draw from our 74,000 results on opioid use and revise that search. So if we take that there and click revise and add something like policy, and then here we have policy, laws, or legislation. So it's giving us a nice kind of sampling to kind of work from here and run the search. Again, with and, so we'll see what the intersection is, practically cut it in half. And if we wanted to kind of even be more precise about it, revise the search again and say we're only looking for policy or policies or laws in the abstract, that number should get even smaller. So we were originally at 74,000 just looking at opioid abuse. We added the and policy or policies or laws or legislation, and that cut the results practically in half. Then we told the database to only search within the abstract of the results, and now we're down to just under 4,100, just over 4,100 results. And again, we can go in here, go into subject, and start looking over, what are the common subjects across all of these results. And then we can see like legislative bills are here, public health is here. So there may be other, other terminology that we may not have considered, but now that they're here, we can start to incorporate them into our search strategy to kind of narrow things down a little bit further. That's not to say that this is the only database to use for that. I know that we'll also talk about another feature within Google that could also be useful for that sort of kind of policy, kind of legal kind of resources as well.
I don't see any other questions at this time.
I'm going to dive out and jump back into our slideshow. And we will now talk about some extra resources that'll be useful.
All right, so citation managers are a thing that we really love to promote, especially as you're doing research. So what is a citation manager? It's a software that helps you organize literature and then write the citations. The citation manager can pull the citation information directly from your browser or from like a PDF you might have, which can make it really convenient to write that citation or just to keep track of things you've seen. And citation managers will also let you organize the literature you find. So it could be articles, book chapters, websites, things like that, and you put it into kind of a personal research library. A lot of citation managers also allow you to collaborate with others on shared libraries. So if you're working with a team or working with a department, and you want to be able to share the things you've found with each other, you can work with a group library. Next slide. So Zotero is the one that a lot of us recommend. Zotero is one of two really popular ones that are free. The other one is Mendeley. I'm personally a big fan of Zotero, and I help teach Zotero at Michigan State University Libraries. So Zotero has two parts, basically. You go to zotero.org and you hit download, and then you're taken to this page. And what it's having you do is it has you download the desktop application, so like what lives in your computer, and then downloading an extender or a connector to your browser. And both of these have to be open for them to talk to each other, but it does help because that's the browser connector is what allows you to download the citation information directly from the page into your desktop application. It's free to download, as I said, but there is a limit to the free cloud storage. You get about 300 megabytes. People don't generally run into this as an issue unless you're saving like hundreds of PDFs. It'll let you save the link to where you found it. But so you don't necessarily have to save the PDF. And then support is provided through public forums by other users. So there's no like official support. It's what's called an open source software. So people who are much better at computers than I am do provide a lot of support about the coding and like the backend resources. And I found those forums really, really helpful. They're basically just keyword text searchable, and if somebody else has had a similar problem, somebody else has also probably found a solution for you. So they're really great for that way. Don't be scared by the fact that there's like no official support. Next slide. So this is what the desktop application looks like. And I know it's kind of small, but over here on this left side, we can see my library. And then I have these different little kind of folders. You know, the one thing I love about Zotero is it's downright adorable. All of the little icons are like so cute to me. So you can see I've got like my library, which looks like a file folder, and then all the other little ones look like manila folders. And I can click on those to create a new collection. These are all ones I've created to kind of organize citations. I do a lot of support for researchers at MSU for doing kind of advanced searching. So a lot of this is helpful for me to keep track of those. So you can see I have a couple there. There's also, you can do subsections. Below that, there are tags, and I'll talk a little bit more about tags once I talk about the far right side. In the center, so right now we're looking at my folder that is HDFS, that's short for Human Development and Family Studies. That's a department I work with here at MSU. And these are some articles I found on inclusive teaching practices. And you can kind of see the title, the creator, the year, the date. You can also change what you want to show there if you would like really want the publisher to show. You can have that show and that display in the center here. You'll also notice each of the little icons next to it look like a little printed out paper. That means that they're a little scholarly paper. Other ones have different icons, and I'll show those in a second. Over on the far right is the kind of detailed page for whatever citation you've clicked on. And this is where you can like edit it. Like, so if you notice like a misspelling or like something came in wonky from the database, you can change it here. You can also just see more information. This also gives you things like the URL you originally got it from if you want to go back and find it. There's also a second tab up here that says notes. You can add notes on it if you would like. There are also tags, and then related lets you connect things, but usually I see people use notes and tags a lot. So tags, you can have them that you make your own, and you can kind of do, what I do for a lot of mine is I tag them either to read. So just to let myself know that I haven't read it yet. And that can be really helpful in organizing your library. So this is what the desktop application looks like. So if you could click on the next slide. This is what the browser connector will look like. So the connector allows your browser to export the citation information from the web page directly to your desktop application. And all you have to do is click on the little icon to save it. It usually looks like the type of resource the citation is. So that for that first one at the top, it was a research paper. So it looks like a little typed out paper. The second one is the Google Slides that we're using. And so it looks like a little presentation board. And then the last one is a book. And so it looks like a little book. This does work with most library and research databases. It's very good at pulling the metadata behind the website and providing that citation information. But you do have to let the page fully load. That's like the #1 issue I run into is people get a little too excited and they click on it when it's saving it as a web page. It hasn't fully loaded all the information for that citation. So just give it a second after the page loads and it should pop up there. I'll hand it over to Stephen for this. I think you're muted, Stephen.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks, Carin. Yeah, so public library resources. So many of the public libraries, in the United States often have research databases. And that's also true for small, small branches that may not even be in a city like New York or Detroit or Chicago or anything like that. A lot of the states have kind of connected library kind of resources available electronically that all of the different branches within the state can kind of connect to through their library website. And these kind of statewide public library systems can provide access to databases so that anyone can use them. A lot of times, I think maybe some of the more popular reasons why these kind of databases are available kind of statewide is for things like history or like genealogy and things like that. But they do also have databases for research. Whether it's for if you have a school age child who's doing a book report or a research paper for their history or science class. Databases like Academic Search Complete or Education Source can be useful for kind of getting them familiar with research at a very young age. But as practicing social workers, these databases could also be useful for us as well. Kind of looking for a lot of the research that we saw within the NASW research library, we can also find some similar types of resources through databases like we see on the screen here, like Academic Search Complete, Psychology and Behavioral Sciences collection, things like that. And like I mentioned earlier about the user interface, it may look a little bit different than what we saw within the NASW research library or Google Scholar, but a lot of the techniques that we talked about in terms of Boolean logic, truncation, and wildcards, all of those things will still be, methods that you can apply, techniques that you can apply when you're doing your searching.
So I put in this example since it's I'm the Michigan person on our panel here today, although Dwayne, I didn't realize, is also in the Michigan area. So Michigan has the Michigan E-Library or Michigan Electronic Library. It's just, we call it MelCat. And it's the same thing, there's resources for K through 12, especially a lot of genealogy stuff for folks, but they do have access to things like Academic Search Complete, which will give you access to, it's another EBSCO database. That will let you search academic literature.
And I'm one of the two New York people. This is Novel and Why, run by the New York State Library, and very similar to MelCat in that it provides kind of genealogy research, research for students of all ages, but then also kind of like subject specific resources. So there's a lot of kind of similarities in terms of the research databases that you may be able to access within these kind of statewide kind of resources at the public library. And in some cases, there will be kind of looking at this kind of box over here on the right-hand side, just being able to prove that you are, living in the state or working in the state will give you access to these sorts of resources. If you are, if you're looking at a research library, within your physical public library, there may even be some exceptions there where they have licensed a database that is independent from what we're seeing in like Novel NY or Mailcat, but is only available if you are physically located, in that public library at that time. So when you go to your local public library's website or go into your local public library, kind of physically walking through the doors, ask the librarian to see, what sort of databases are available, both like physically on site as well as what's available electronically. Because you may be surprised, there may be some things that you'll have access to, right away from home, but there may also be some things that you can only access when you're at a physical public library.
So in addition to public libraries, other resources you might consider for gaining access to some of these more specialized academic databases is local public universities. So many public universities, especially the flagship state universities, offer access to the databases if you're able to come into the library in person. So for example, at Michigan State University, anyone is able to come into the main library and use these computers to access all of our databases. And that little picture is actually from the library at MSU. And this is usually part of a public university's mission. They are public. They typically work with people who are residents of that state, but will also, take information from others in the general area. So we try to make our resources available as much as possible. We do have agreements that we have to have with different vendors who provide these databases, but it's important to us at public universities and as MSU as a land grant university to make resources available to the wider public. Other universities may offer this access with a fee. So it just doesn't hurt to check. If you live within, driving or walking distance of a public university, go to the library's website and see where their contact form is and just ask.
Yeah, so similarly, many universities also offer access to special alumni versions of their databases. The alumni versions are usually limited somewhat in their content, but they still may be useful to you. So you might want to check in with the institution that you graduated from. You might need to get an alumni card or possibly join the Alumni Association to take advantage of the benefits, but you should contact them and see what they have available. Okay, the last resource we wanted to mention is Google. And I know everyone is familiar with using Google, but you may not know that Google also has an advanced search option. So on the lower right-hand corner of the homepage, if you click on settings, there's a pull-up menu that includes an advanced search. And this is similar to the Google Scholar Advanced Search on the top half of the form. But on the bottom half of the advanced search page, you also have this domain filter and a file type filter. And these I find very useful for finding government documents and data from nonprofit organizations. And so this was one of the questions that came up a little bit earlier. And these can really be a big help here. So, with most Google searches, you get back millions of results, and a lot of the commercial or .com results tend to rise to the top. But using these tools can help bring you the .gov, .org, and .edu results. So I'll show you a couple examples on the next slide. you could use that advanced search page to find those state public or university libraries that we were talking about earlier by limiting the domain to .gov or .edu, like the one on the left. I just did an example for Texas, and you can see that they also have, you know, in addition to Michigan and New York, Texas has this TechShare public databases. So, and then the second example on the right, you could use that advanced search to limit to .gov, and then also use that file type filter to limit to PDFs. And that can help you find government reports and data on, say, in this example, food insecurity is one example, and you'll see those results are PDFs. There's a state report and also a national report on food insecurity there. So those are some really handy tools that are obviously free and just there within Google, but kind of buried and a little bit hidden. So we wanted to make sure that you know about those.
This completes our overview of all the resources and tools and things that you already knew, and those things that you already knew, how you can apply them to these free tools and resources that are available to you, either through your alumni as a graduate from your program, through your local kind of state library or public library, as well as through your membership to the NASW. So we thought we'd stop here with a few minutes left and see if you all have any questions.
Thank you to the three of you. This was super helpful and lots of new information. I heard that echoed quite a few times in the chat. While folks are thinking of any questions you have, please feel free to drop those in the chat. I'm just going to put a resource too on, there is a federal piece of legislation specifically regarding social work in libraries, trying to get more folks with MSWs into library settings. It's called the More Social Workers in the Libraries Act. So I'll just drop that if folks want to learn a little bit more information around that. But a question that came through specifically for you, Stephen, just curious around how did your MSW translate into a career in libraries, or how does your social work skills or values play a role in the work you're doing?
Oh, thanks. Great question. So my social work journey is a little bit different in that I already had my library degree and then I got my MSW. So a number of colleagues, there are quite a few, a handful of librarians out there who also have MSWs. And, some of us, it was the MSW first and then the library degree. But it all depends. But in terms of like how I use it in my kind of practice, as a librarian who works with social work students and social work faculty and doctoral students who are, coming back into kind of academia and scholarship after being in the profession for a number of years. A lot of the kind of foundational things that I learned in my social work program around, active listening and building rapport and kind of normalizing and partializing, like all of those sorts of kind of core social work skills really come in handy when I am engaging with students as they begin to kind of ask questions around research, try to explore what's out there in the literature in their given circumstance. I think one of the things that I find especially useful in that kind of rapport building is having those conversations with students, especially when they're in their a good example was one that happened today. I had a consultation with a student who was contacting me from their internship, from their field placement. And they were telling me about the clients that they were working with and how that experience with, families who are dealing with children with ADHD and trying to find ways to offer different types of treatments that are not, pharmacologically based. How to kind of find like what are alternatives or complementary interventions to help with parents and children, when the child has a diagnosis of ADHD. And a lot of the questions, come with, introducing how to use databases and things like that. But a lot of it is just kind of listening and trying to see where the question kind of goes, like trying to see where the why is, and then from the why start to like identify what are the kind of main concepts around the question that they're eventually trying to arrive at. Because at the end of the day, and I think this is one of the things that's kind of particularly interesting and rewarding about working with social work students and working with social workers in general, is the research is not necessarily about just trying to get something published. It's very much about trying to help the community or the person that they've been working with. And seeing those connections, right away is really exciting and can really connect to what it is that where the question kind of comes from. And I imagine Carin and Laurel also have insight on that as well. Yes, it's the MSW, but working with social work students and faculty and researchers in general, I think they're a pretty unique bunch. You all are.
We are.
Yeah, I would just add that, the professional values between librarianship and social work are very, very much aligned. Like, I mean, Stephen and I and Laurel too worked on a project on a different committee, basically connecting the CSWE standards directly to like library and information literacy practice. So there's like a lot of overlap, and that leads to like really great collaborations, I find.
I would 100% agree. I had a former intern a couple of years ago who was dual MSW, Masters of Information Science, and she's now at the Library of Congress in DC. And so it's like you never know necessarily where you could end up and what sort of careers there might intersect between social work. I think we've got time for one question. Jen, did you have a question? I see you're unmuted, so I wanted to make sure. No,
I was going to thank the team.
Yes. Well, so final maybe question or thought would be, is there one common issue you tend to see a lot of from students or faculty that has an easy solution from your perspective?
I'll give one example. So most often when I work with students or even people who've come back, because as at a public university, if you live in the state of Michigan and you are a social worker and you need help finding research, you can email me. I will help.
Wow.
I can give you PDFs that you don't have access to, but I can show you how to do these searches. The biggest problem people come to me is thinking that the search is going to be easy.
Yeah.
I'm going to do one search. I'm going to put in my keywords and I'm going to do it like Google. I'm going to put a full sentence in there. And that's just not how the databases work. And every instruction session I do with students, I really try to emphasize that, like, you're going to do this a couple of times. Do not get frustrated at the first search not really working or maybe not finding what you need. I mean, it really is just like, don't get frustrated. Ask for help when you need it. Too, like many university libraries and many public libraries have like what's called a reference desk or like a chat service, and we're there to help. All we ask is that you're not mean to us, basically. Like that's just, we'll help you. Just don't be mean to us. And even if you're mean to us, we will help you, but
Oh my gosh.
it'll hurt our feelings a little. I don't know if Stephen or Laurel have anything to add on, like, yeah, that's not something with an easy fix either. It's just, I don't know.
Well, you guys have all made the point that, Google might produce lots of results with an easy question, and that can be great. but you're getting all your commercial posts, people who paid to get there, and sources that could range from really credible ones to not. And if you're using, academic databases, then you're limiting it. You can say peer reviewed, you can look for authoritative text. What are you guys seeing in terms of AI coming in to impact both the answers we're getting in the free world but also maybe is there an option where AI will help with searches that in a way we don't have now?
Well, I want to answer this question, but before I answer it, I want to kind of come back to the Google example, because I think it actually illustrates something that's really social work, very social work interest. The way we search as people,
Right.
that's not necessarily something we learned in school. And when we did learn it in school, we learned it because of Google. And when you think about what is Google, what is Google motivated to do in terms of search? It wants us to search, the top results and the ad that's associated with that result.
Mm-hmm.
So if we think about it in that framework of to Karen's point about searching takes time, the way we've been taught to search,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of antithetical to that. We've
Right.
been taught, you click, and you get what you want. It's instant gratification, and it's free with some ads. What we're teaching in terms of how to use databases is no, search in and of itself is its own practice. And to kind of connect that to AI, I think it's something for us to be mindful of. It's
Right.
there will be, yes, AI is going to be involved in how research is conducted, how search is conducted, and how it changes our everyday practices. But let's remember the Google model of how that disrupted and changed everything,
Right.
and the instant gratification that came with it. What are we trading off? What are we
Right.
giving away in exchange for this free, fast, instant sort of magic?
Right. What do they
Yeah.
say? If the product is free, you are the product.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I do
that's,
think
I mean,
there
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
No.
sorry. I do think that there are areas that it can be useful. Sometimes I hear a lot of librarians use about ChatGPT of to brainstorm keywords. So give me synonyms for this.
100%. Yeah.
That could be really helpful. But I think this is one of the areas where there's a lot of overlap between librarianship ethics and social work ethics of
Right.
somebody's getting paid at the end of the day. And
Absolutely.
you are the ChatGPT, you are giving them all of your data, essentially.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's just important to keep in mind. And also, these AI, they're not agnostic. They reflect and represent the same biases that the humans.
100%. Yeah, we're finding that at NASW.
And just to flip it, because it's social workers working with their clients, working with their communities, these tools are freely available to everyone. So when your client or your patient or the community that you're working with comes to you and says, ChatGPT said this, how do you have that conversation about,
Right.
oh, well, ChatGPT is free and does this and does that, but how are you with that information, or how are you with kind of processing that?
Right.
There's all these other kind of meta conversations for us to have, with ourselves, as social workers, as librarians, and also as we work with, we all work with people. That's one of the fundamental connections that librarians and social workers have in common, is that we are, we provide service and support to people.
Right.
So when resources come in to kind of aid or kind of maybe complicate things, how do we have those conversations about that?
Right. I love it. Well, that's a good note on which to wrap up this one, I think, Dwayne.
Yeah, no, this was really, really a good conversation. And I know I personally learned a lot.
I did too.
it's been a minute since I've been in school, so I feel like I do a lot of research, but I got some new tools in my toolkit today, so I appreciate the three of you for helping me out, and I know everyone else is feeling the same way. So if we could just give a virtual round of applause to Stephen, Carin, and Laurel for joining us today.
Yeah.
Like I said, again, we will have this recording available. It should be up in the next couple of weeks, so be on the lookout for that if you want to watch any pieces of it again. But I want to thank again everyone for being here, and our next program will be in the third Thursday in May, so be on the lookout for that registration information soon. But with that, we'll just say good night, everybody, and thanks for hopping on.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.